Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Business and Travel Podcast. My name is Jackson Dean. I'll be your host, and today we are joined by Kimberly Teo, who's the co-founder and in charge of ventures at Pitchblak.co. Last week we had the other co-founder on, Adrian Osman. We had some really, really cool points there on getting funding and tips about pitching and all the different things that are leading up to actually securing some successful funding for your business. This week, we're going to go in a bit of a different direction with the same sort of company. And Kim has a very interesting story to tell about securing funding and one of her experiences in one of her companies. So how are you doing today there, Kim?
I'm great. You've got back-to-back Pitchblak people, so I hope we're adding some value to your podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the early stages of the investment that you secured, but then eventually turned down, I believe.
Yeah, not a common story that you'd typically hear, getting some funding and then choosing not to take it. So this was going back about 3.5, maybe 4 years now, actually. A startup called Neighbour Flavour, which was really a concept around you can buy home-cooked food from people that live around you. So people would coin it the Uber for food, connecting people who love to cook and struggle to monetize their passion for cooking with people that don't want to cook and just want access to home-cooked meals. A really great idea, and it was just the easiest concept to sell in terms of getting people excited and going to events and pitching, and just like really, really easy to get, I guess, what anyone would consider early stage traction. And that led us to, I guess, cutting the story very short, led us to raising, we were actually only going for $200,000 as a pre-seed round, and we ended up having $550,000 like term sheet signed, everything, like a date decided, as a date agreed as to when this money would hit the bank account. Had secured like $20,000 early on, and this was like the remaining amount of that it was the goal was 200. We ended up deciding that we would take 500, and I had not a great feeling in my stomach because the business itself had some legal issues. So you're not actually allowed to cook in your home and sell the food that you make. It's considered you actually need a commercial kitchen license to be able to do it, and that requires getting council approval. Sometimes it requires fitting out your kitchen differently, and if you get caught in the Food Act, it actually says you can get fined up to $40,000. I'd never heard in my time of anyone that got fined $40,000. The maximum I'd ever heard was $5,000. But still, like for an early stage startup, that's a very daunting thing to go up against. But, like Airbnb at the time were changing rules all around the world. Uber were like literally just at that point where they were starting to knock over New South Wales and, like getting state by state across the hurdle of Uber being legalized. So it was around this time where there was so much momentum that startups were coming in and creating new rules that people were just like, oh, you'll just figure it out. You'll figure it out. It'll be fine. And that's like, and that was literally what every other person around me, including like people on our team and just everyone that was so confident in our ability to execute on this thing. And I ended up turning down the money because I didn't feel good about not having an answer to what if I got fined. So cooks would say, like, I'm happy to sign up, but what if I get a fine? And I'm like, fuck, I don't know. I can't say that I'm going to pay for every fine because $500,000 disappears very quickly. They're paying for fines. And, the reputation of the business starts to fall apart before it's even established, right? So you can't really be copying any fines. And we got 2 cease and desist letters from the Victorian and Western Australian state governments before we even launched. Wow. Literally written, stamped, written, printed, signed with a pen and sent to my home. I'm like, oh my God, it's crazy that people know about us, and then also crazy that governments are taking the time to tell us not to do it. So I reached out to actually the head of public policy at Uber in Australia, got him on our team as an advisor, a guy in Hong Kong who was the head of public policy for Asia Pacific for Uber actually helped me heaps. His name's Jordan, and he like wrote out a list of costs that would be involved in terms of lobbying and consultants and just all the stuff around changing regulations. And I was like, holy shit. And it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, and a startup just can't afford to spend their few $100,000 on fighting regulations. Like, you're spending that on product and marketing. You're not spending that on fighting regulations. That's just so abnormal. So I started to think that it would be a concept that took off somewhere else in the world. That startup would come over to Australia really funded, so like 10 million bank, ready to take on the regulations in Australia with some precedents of it working elsewhere in the world, and reached out to a company in New York who were called Homemade at the time, now called Pilotworks. And they were leaders in this, like exactly the same idea, probably 18 months ahead of us, went through Techstars. The two guys who started it had done 3 iterations of the same idea before. So they were like dead set on this concept, and you could tell that like food was their passion inside and out. Became really good friends with them, went over to New York, like lived there for 3 months, actually worked in the startup. And that's when I knew that it actually had, like, I didn't take the money because I wanted to go over to New York and see if I could actually make it work somewhere else in the world, and then potentially come back to Australia was kind of the game plan. And then when I went to New York, I realized that the business model just does not stack up, and the value proposition just like isn't as simple as saying everyone loves home cooked food. And that is why there isn't like a massive Uber for food, Uber for home cooking startup in the world. Like that, it just literally, there isn't one. And people in Australia have tried. Like, I've heard from every single one of those people. They reach out to us all the time. I've told them all of my stories, and I've shared all the scars, and just people have pumped millions of dollars into this idea, and nothing's worked. And I realized that while I was in New York, and I guess I can share later on the exact reasons why. But within 3 weeks of being there, I just completely called it off.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. That's amazing. So how does this idea differentiate from, say, Uber? Sorry, not Uber, like U-Foods?
Yeah, so the difference between Neighbour Flavour and like U-Foods is, you know, pre-packed, manufactured at volume and made in a commercial kitchen and sent to you once a week. Whereas this was like, I feel like pasta tonight. I wonder if anyone around me is making pasta for dinner, and I can go and buy a portion from them.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's like Uber Eats, but for home cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I guess there must be like a huge problem with like quality assurance. And like, is that the main big problem that I could see there?
Yeah, so the value proposition for, you know, hindsight's an amazing thing, right? So the value proposition for home cooks was that you could make money doing something that you love doing. And previously, there's no opportunity unless you want to be a chef, get paid shit money, work Fridays, Saturdays, or open a restaurant, costs like 100, 200 grand. Like, lots of people don't have the luxury to do that. Or you could start like a little food business, but even that's pretty hard. So like a lot of people flocked to the Neighbour Flavour because they were like, oh my God, I love cooking. I have my friends over all the time. My co-founder Kerry and I did like hundreds of interviews with cooks. Like, as they signed up, they could book in a 20-minute call with us, and we would just do like call after call, afternoon after afternoon for like months, just getting to know these people. And they were like, I love having my friends over, and I love cooking for people, and I love entertaining, but it costs me heaps of money, and I don't do it that regularly, but I love doing it. So we found all these people who like loved cooking as a passion. And the reality actually was that even if you sold 10 meals a night, that's a lot of meals, and you made $12 per meal, because people are like stingy when it comes to home cooked food. If it's $15, they're like, why would I pay $15 when I can just get restaurant food for $15? You know, they don't value it the same way as restaurant food. And so $12, $10, $120, you spent 4 hours shopping, cooking, washing, cleaning, waiting for this person to show up at your door, packaging. Like, it's actually, you end up not making any money.
Yeah, right.
the reality of the situation was like, oh my God, they loved the idea of being able to make money, but if they valued their time, they were actually losing money a lot of the time. And the ingredients would have cost, $50, $60 of the $120. So not a great position. And then on the buyer side, which is more the side that which is definitely the side that I sit on, we want the thing that people that don't want to cook really, really care about is convenience. And when I was in New York, we had a running platform and we had cooks and sellers and everything. And it was just, I was running the operations of it. And you had to decide what you wanted for dinner at 2 p.m. There was a cutoff time because this poor guy had to go, or girl had to go and cook and shop and, who's deciding what they want to eat for dinner at 2 p.m.?
Yeah.
No one. And then you have to a lot, and we tried lots of postage options and all that sort of stuff. But at the start it was pick up only. And you had to go and pick up your food, even if it was a 10, 15-minute walk away, that's still far for a lot of people who can't be bothered even cooking, let alone, spending $12 and going and picking up their food 10 to 15 minutes away. And then you're rocking up at a house that you do not know. And I did it a few times when I lived in New York because I needed to see what this experience was like. And it's actually kind of scary. You're like, where am I? And you're walking up to this door. You don't really know if you're in the right place. There's no signage telling you you're ringing the right doorbell. And you ring the doorbell and you're just hoping that some friendly person walks out with a paper bag and your food. And then you take your food and then you're starving. And now you've got nowhere to eat it. You've got to walk 10, 15 minutes home and heat it up. And it's just, honestly, the experience was shit. And the moment I knew was we were standing in a team circle, Monday, all hands, 10 a.m. in the morning, and we got $50 each every week to use in the app, and just no one was using it. The team weren't using this thing.
Yeah. Is that company obviously not going anymore?
Well, no, they're going and they're killing it, but they're doing something very different. So they, some of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met, and they had a massive passion for the cook side, the food producer side of it.
Yeah.
Worked in restaurants their whole life, actually had a cafe together, and they have turned it into, it's called Pilot Works today. And it's like Pitchblak for food. So they want to grow food entrepreneurs. If you think you've got great burgers, you can come to Pilot Works. Commercial kitchen spaces, storage, everything, technology systems, supply chain sorted for you. Where do you get the best meat patties? Where do you get the best lettuce? All that sort of stuff. And they teach you marketing and branding and packaging and try and build these food businesses. And they're killing it. They've raised 16 mil. The guys are doing amazing. But it's a very, very different business to what it started off as.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's an example of, I guess, turning the money down. But I mean, one of the things you touched on is your gut feeling or emotional intelligence. How much have you used that throughout your career?
I think I've learned to use it more and more. And I think with every bad decision you make, you learn it. And with every good decision, it gets reinforced. So you learn to trust your gut over time, especially with people, but also with commercial things. It was actually really Neighbour Flavour was probably one of the hardest gut decisions to make because all these people around me that I really, really trusted were just go for it.
Yeah.
And people were throwing money at you, throwing money at the idea. And I know it's because of the hype that was created. We just had this exploding social media. We were on Channel 7, on primetime news, and we hadn't even launched. We literally didn't even have an app in the App Store. It was just, we had all these articles. We didn't even put out one single press release, and it was just gaining this crazy momentum of its own. And I know that people got behind it because of the hype that we'd created, which we'd done a good job at doing, but they weren't getting the hard questions that we were getting to answer. So I actually spent probably about 2 weeks not talking to a lot of people and just being with my co-founders and I, and we wrote down every option that we had. Running commercial kitchens was definitely an option, as what Pilot Works is doing now. And we sat there and we were could we honestly run any of these other businesses for the next 5 to 7 years? And the answer was no. like I'm not a cook. I'm not someone that, I barely even cook actually. Like Adrian and I eat out every meal. And I could not imagine running a business supporting people that I barely understand. So it was a very gut instinct to say, like, none of these pivot, people talk about pivoting and just going with what the demand is pulling you towards at the time, or what the insights are. But the insights that we'd stumbled on, like, really didn't intersect with the passions that we had and like what we could see ourselves doing. So that was a big reason that we called it. And I really could not have been, like, I took 20 grand and I didn't take anything more from anyone else. And I could not, like, I'm pumped that we didn't. And if we did, we probably would have felt compelled to spend it, because you get the money, even if you spend like a few $1,000s, you're compelled to figure it out. And that's a very long, deep rabbit hole that we would have gone down 18 months probably of like spending money, coming up against challenges. And then I think eventually would have landed in exactly the same spot. But we saved ourselves 18 months and 500 grand of other people's money that I'm very glad I did.
Yeah, wow. So this was about 18 months ago now that this all unfolded?
It was about 2.5 years ago. Actually, I got back from New York in May. So, yeah, about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. So in the last 2.5 years, what's been your main role at Pitchblak, and what have, obviously drawing off that experience of everything, how much has that helped you with the advisory that you've been doing with Pitchblak?
Yeah, heaps. Like, we learn through, everyone learns through their own experiences, and as a collective group within Pitchblak, we've got a lot of different experiences, and we continue to learn through doing our own ventures as well as supporting other people with theirs. So we're just like, we're actually so lucky. Adrian and I sit there sometimes and we get to hear like hundreds of ideas and help like hundreds of entrepreneurs, and those data points are just invaluable when it comes to starting your own ventures or helping the next person, because you're just learning from everyone else. And really the goal, the last 2 years have been very much about helping other people and creating the IP around early stage entrepreneurship, which was a pretty big challenge, but we feel like we're some of the best in the world now at doing that. And now just recently, like over the last 3-4 months, we've decided to do the gut thing, like we talked about before, think back to what the focus is and where we want to be in 5 to 7 years and 18 months even, and try and do a mix of ventures and helping other entrepreneurs. And the venture stuff is the wealth creation and the asset building, and the Pitchblak is a social enterprise, actually. It's not really about making a lot of money off early stage entrepreneurs, because it's nearly impossible unless you invest. And we've just got to find a balance between doing our own ventures and helping other people.
Yeah, it's awesome. I really love the initiative, and that's, a big reason why I wanted to get you guys on after I saw your website and what you guys do. It's like a big reason why I run this podcast. It's a free podcast, free information, just giving people, that open source approach to like mistakes that we've made in the past. And hopefully that gives people the, encouragement to make mistakes and learn from what we're doing, and hopefully not run into the same sort of mistakes, because I've seen people waste years of their lives taking the 500 grand and not running with their gut. I'm sure you've seen hundreds.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes your gut tells you one thing, and you just logically you've got to do something else for a little bit of time. But it's important to note, like, at least take note of what your instinct's telling you to do and try and get back on that track as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are your main areas at the moment that you and the company are focusing on as sort of like specializations in the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, we really help very early on. So I have an idea, I'm not really sure what to do. I need some support with firming up the idea, validating the product, validating the customers, getting some traction before I have a product. raising some money, designing a website, all that sort of stuff. Just all the things that we did really, really well for Neighbour Flavour that landed us 500 grand. Like actually just all of that stuff. And the one thing that I would have done differently, actually, like, and now we get every marketplace idea to do this, is if I had my time again and I knew, and if someone said to me, like, run a Facebook group or try and simulate this exchange of food. It's not that hard to do. At first, it can be cash. It doesn't have to be through a fancy app. There doesn't need to be a payment platform. It can literally be just cash. And a lot of Facebook groups, like people sell clothes and do all sorts of stuff. So I could have set up a Facebook group where within a small neighborhood, people were selling food to each other. And I probably would have very quickly realized two things. I think that, people were buying more in bulk than in like ad hoc 7 p.m. Hey, does anyone have leftovers? Like, I don't think that would have really happened. And people would have been buying like, hey, my family meals for the week. And that wasn't what we had planned at all. Like that we were thinking, meal by meal. And I think if I ran that Facebook group, I would have realized that the only way that people make money is selling stuff in bulk. And the only way that consumers are willing to go and pick something up is driving around on a Sunday for their entire week's worth of meals. But yeah, we didn't do it and I didn't know to do it. And now every marketplace idea that comes across Pitchblak, we tell them, let's run a Facebook group. Let's see if we can get some traction because everyone's on Facebook. You don't have to get someone to download a new app to join your group. If they want it, they'll join the group. The harder thing to do is actually getting someone to download a new product just to join your group. So like leveraging existing communities and that sort of stuff is massive.
Yeah, that's a really insightful point. I mean, one of my most recited quotes to people on this podcast and to my clients and everything else is version 1 is better than version none. And when you come up with an idea, most people are thinking about version 10, what it would actually look like when it's finished, but it takes such a long time to get it to that point that you just need to get some version out first, test the market, see what the feedback is, and then iterate it, and then you've got your version 2. And just like you said, I've been around a lot of people that have built really expensive apps and really expensive products without actually testing the market first. And if, as you say, you've got these huge communities already there on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, everywhere. And they've got tools within these platforms to just leverage those communities and test your idea and see what the feedback is and see what people really want. And then from there, you can start to really invest a lot of money and time if you feel like you've got the data that's supporting your idea. And
correct.
It's a different way of going about things. But if you can wrap your head around doing it, as you know, like you can save years of time and lots of money.
Yeah, like I wish I knew those things, and it's really hard as a first-time founder, and that's why Pitchblak exists, to know those things. Like, how is anyone meant to know that people are like, I have an idea, I need to build a product? Because that's what every angel investor tells me. That's what everyone tells me to do, build a product. You never stop and think of the ways that you can actually get some customers and test some of your value, like test some of your features and ideas and just try and get the ball rolling. And the more you do it, the more creative you get. Like, just the number of hacky products that we come up with at Pitchblak is crazy. Like, we just are so good at hacking together all these existing platforms, and we just know the ins and outs of Zapier and just knowing like all the things that you can plug in to make it seem like a really automated experience, and the customer doesn't know that much that it's not your perfect product, and you build it really quickly and you get some really great feedback really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually wanted to ask a question then just about your space, and you're obviously in it really heavy. You would think, or from my perspective, the angel investors, not so much venture capitalists, because obviously they know exactly what's going on, but you'd think angel investors that are doing a lot of the pre-seed and seed funding for companies would recommend, sort of what we've just been speaking about, testing communities and leveraging platforms and trying to get, some data back on whether or not the idea is valid. Do you actually find that angel investors ever talk about this or ever have this sort of approach, even though it's their money that they're investing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that the I guess there's two sides to that question. Like, is it lack of knowledge, or is it just like the inability to say no? So I think a lot of the time investors don't want to say a hard no. So they say things like, come back to me when.
Yeah.
And when you've got a product is a really easy thing to say. So come back to me when you've built your app, come back to me. Like what they should be saying is come back to me when you've got customers, not come back to me when you have built your app. And I think that's probably the number one reason that entrepreneurs go into this spiral, because they're receiving feedback, acting on feedback, but the feedback isn't actually real feedback. It's a case of like, well, they just want to keep the door open. So if in a year's time you are doing well, that they haven't given you a hard no.
Yeah.
So they have FOMO too. They want to be involved, and they want to have an opportunity down the track, so they don't want to say no. And this, I guess, the second thing around creating hacky products, and it depends on the background of the investor. Some people are angel investors, but they've never started a technology startup. They might have come into money from property, or they might just be genuinely interested in supporting young founders and getting involved in technology, but maybe never run one themselves. And if you've never had that experience, like where would you, there's not that many books about it, or like maybe there should be an angel investor book about the things to look for, or, like I think the knowledge and the ability to think of those things come from experience. And unless you've done it yourself, like it's very, very hard to know what to advise.
Well, that's probably a good question to sort of leave on. What are a few books that you would recommend to founders before getting into, trying to raise money?
Trying to raise money is a good one. Like, it's crazy. Like for us, raising money is just as much about having a great validated idea as it is about playing a game. And people don't speak about that very much. I think some of the best people that I've seen raise capital, like, man, they play a game. It is like dating. It is like sales. It is the most hardcore version of creating FOMO and sales that you probably ever do as a founder. And there's a book, actually, Adrian recommended it to me, called Pitch Anything. And it's probably the best sales book that I've read. Yeah. And it talks, and it's so like, he's raised like, I don't know, 400 mil or something crazy like that. And it is empowering to know that stuff, because you will meet all these sorts of different types of investors, and they're going to throw you left, right, and center, and you just need to learn to play the game. And capital is not about having the best spreadsheet. It's just getting people to like you, getting lots of people to be interested enough that you can create a level of FOMO, and then have too many people wanting in that you get to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really
and it's a bloody game. Like, it's a game. It's about creating time pressure. It's about creating like, oh my God, there's, like for Neighbour Flavour, for example, because a lot of it was unsophisticated money. So we probably had like a fifth, or 100 to 200 grand was people that had done startups before, but a lot of it came from family, friends, ex-colleagues, networks that we had around us that just wanted to invest in us, really. And after getting that first 20 grand, I had so many people asking me so many questions, and we were like, how are we going to field all these questions, and how are we going to just get everyone to feel settled, or feel like they can make a decision confidently? I actually ran like a investor night at my house back like 3.5 years ago, and got as many people that were sniffing around, like adult interested, into the room together, and said, this is your opportunity to ask all the questions and hear all the questions that other people had. And everyone like walked out of that like feeling so much FOMO, because there were like 20 people in the room, and everyone had asked, because everyone's asked all their questions. You feel like all the questions have been asked and all the questions have been answered. So there's like this sense of relief, because you're like, oh wow, they actually had an answer to everything, and not necessarily had an answer to everything, but they had a plan, even if they didn't have an answer. And it was very relaxed, like just literally around my living room. And people walked out of there. And then within, I think, a couple of days, we set a time frame for when the round was going to open and when the round was going to close. And we made it short, like 2 weeks. And you had to get your signed letter of intent, your signed term sheets in by a specific date, agreeing to on the term sheet that the money would be in the bank on a specific date. And that like level of, I guess, time pressure, like you wouldn't do that unless you knew that you could comfortably raise enough money that like between you and the investor they told you how much they were willing to invest. So we knew that we were oversubscribed. So we're like, fuck, let's just put the pressure on. Let's just set a date, open the round, close the round 2 weeks later. And that level of like intensity and deadline just created FOMO.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word. Yeah. And like, I don't think we would have been able to raise that much money if it weren't for everyone thinking that they were going to miss out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the book, Aaron refers to that as creating a window of opportunity and making people believe that window of opportunity is going to expire. And if you can figure that out, and he's got a bunch of really cool steps in doing that, it works like a charm. And it
really
works in so many different situations too. It's not just trying to raise money. You can use that book I've used that book to train sales teams. You know, if you can teach salespeople the art of frame stacking, which is something Oren coined as well, it really puts you in control of almost all sales conversations. And
correct, yeah.
It's a really good book. So that's a really good recommendation. I think one final question I've got off a few things you were talking about there was what would you suggest when it comes to raising money? Which, you know, should you be looking for someone that has money or someone that has talent, skills, experience, and money?
As an investor?
Yeah.
Yeah, we call it dumb money and smart money. I think everyone in the world calls it that. Actually, I don't know if they say dumb money, but they definitely say smart money. I think either are fine for really early stage, like pre-seed. I think if you can get some smart money, then good on you. But really, like at the beginning, people are investing in you and they're investing in their respect for you and your ability to execute. And the idea is just an idea at that stage with some traction and some early stage traction. And really they're investing in your ability to do the hard work and stick at the game. So we actually say like dumb money is fine. And the category that you want to avoid is is dumb but thinks they're smart.
Yeah.
So people that give you 15 grand or 10 grand or 5, like those people tend to not put in much money, and they're hounding you every day, like sending you articles about competitors and sending you articles about bad things that, like, you know, just making your life hard and having an opinion about your social media posts that you put out. And it's just like, get off my back, let me do my thing. So I think you want either, like, smart money is of course the best, dumb money that actually, like, people that you love and care about and that you want to take on this journey with you. And when you win, you want to celebrate your successes with them, is fine, like more than fine. And the people that you want to avoid are the people that can't afford 20 grand. Like, honestly, the people that want to put in 5, they can't afford to lose that 5 grand, and they're going to be the most annoying people to have on board. So yeah, just avoid them.
Yeah, no, that's really, really insightful and really good advice. Yeah, I really want to thank you for coming on today, Kim. It's really been great talking to you, and it's a good story. I hope anyone that's been listening got a lot out of that, because it's not a very commonly told story, turning down $500,000. But yeah, thanks so much, Kim. I mean, for anyone who's listening, if you want to find out more information about Kim's company, you can go to pitchblak.co. It's without a C, which is pitchblak.co. And we'll link it all up in the notes section of this podcast episode as well. So if you're on socialgrowthmedia.com, you should be able to find the links here below.
Anything else there, Kim, that you want to add before I let you go?
No, I'm good. Thank you for your time. It's been really fun chatting.
No worries, Kim, anytime. And we'll look forward to hearing some of the feedback. If you guys have any questions, shoot them through. You can do that on this page as well. And we'll see you in the next episode.